He's fucking slow on the straights, and he's been banging around. He's been banging the drum for multiple weeks about it, and they don't listen to him because they don't respect him.
Sorry, I can't hear you from all the way back there, George. Maybe you got to go a little bit faster.
I'm saying gas. Gaslight gas.
George Russell is starting to wonder if his own team has already picked a favorite, and he's not the one wearing the crown. Picture this. You're a Formula One driver. You've been racing wheel to wheel with your own teammate for track position. You feel you should already own outright, and suddenly your car just stops pulling. No warning, no explanation in the moment, just dead weight on the straights while a 7-time world champion closes in behind you. That's exactly the position George Russell found himself in on the opening lap in Spa, and it ended with Lewis Hamilton's front wing making contact and taking him out of contention before the race had barely started. Here's the part that stings even more than the crash itself. Hamilton picked up a 5-second time penalty for the incident, which sounds like justice on paper. But out on track, penalties don't undo momentum. Hamilton kept racing, kept clawing back positions, and crossed the line in 4th place anyway. That result was more than enough to catapult him past Russell in the overall standings and into 2nd place in the championship. Russell, meanwhile, watched his own championship position slide down to 3rd, all because of a collision he had no real way to avoid. And if that wasn't a bitter enough pill, his teenage teammate Kimi Antonelli didn't just survive the chaos around him, he thrived in it, taking the win at Spa and doubling his championship lead over Russell in the process. So now, with barely any time to process what happened, Russell and the rest of the Mercedes operation are straight back at it this weekend at the Hungaroring. And that quick turnaround matters, because there's been no real breathing room for Russell to shake off what happened in Belgium before he's expected to climb back in the car and go again. Let's rewind to what actually caused this mess in the first place, because it's not as simple as 2 drivers misjudging a corner. Russell was adamant almost immediately afterward that this wasn't a normal racing incident. In his mind, the real story was buried underneath the crash itself. He was dealing with a battery issue that sapped his straight-line speed at the worst possible moment, leaving him defending a position on track that, under normal circumstances, he felt he shouldn't have even been fighting for. Imagine driving a car you know is meant to be quicker than what's behind you, only to have the power just disappear when you need it most, forcing you into close-quarters combat with a car that shouldn't have even been near you. Team Principal Toto Wolff saw it differently in the immediate aftermath, brushing it off as something that could have happened to either driver regardless of who was ahead or behind on the circuit that day. But since then, Mercedes themselves have gone on record confirming there actually was a software bug affecting the cars in Spa. And critically, it wasn't isolated to Russell's machine. Both cars were dealing with it. That confirmation matters, because it validates what Russell was saying in the moment, even if it took the team a little while to spell it out publicly. Still, knowing there was a shared technical gremlin doesn't automatically erase the psychological residue of what happened. And that's where things get interesting heading into Hungary. On ahead of this weekend's race, former driver and current pundit Karun Chandok dug into exactly what's simmering beneath the surface at Mercedes right now. He made the point that any functioning top team wants both of its drivers winning, wants both of them finishing 1st and 2nd whenever possible, because that's simply what serves the team's interests best. There's no reasonable argument that Mercedes would deliberately want to see Russell struggle while Antonelli races off into the distance. From a pure business and championship standpoint, it makes far more sense for both cars to be scoring big points every single weekend. But logic on a spreadsheet doesn't always calm the nerves of a driver who's just watched his championship hopes take a direct hit because of a mechanical gremlin nobody warned him about. And that's exactly what Chandok flagged as the real concern going forward. He described this moment as needing a genuine rebuild of confidence between Russell and his team. Russell wants answers, and he wants them in plain terms, not vague reassurances, but a clear explanation of what actually broke, why it carried over from Friday practice all the way through the Saturday sessions, and concrete proof that whatever caused it has been identified and fixed for good. Because here's the thing about paranoia in a high-pressure sport like Formula One. It doesn't need much fuel to start spreading. One unexplained mechanical failure at the wrong moment, especially one that costs championship points and coincides with your much younger teammate racing off to victory, is exactly the kind of scenario that can plant doubt in a driver's head about whether the team is fully behind him. And once that seed is planted, it tends to grow, especially if the issue isn't addressed quickly and transparently. Chandok's broader point looked past this single race weekend too. He pointed out that the next two circuits on the calendar, Hungary and then Zandvoort, are essentially the opposite profile from what teams dealt with at Spa. Those are described as energy-rich tracks, the kind of circuits where cars can push flat out through qualifying without the same kind of energy management concerns that plague Spa. In theory, that should be reassuring. A different type of track layout, a different demand profile for the power unit, and less opportunity for whatever bug hit them in Belgium to resurface in quite the same way. Chandok even suggested fans should expect to see some genuinely aggressive, flat-out qualifying sessions in both Budapest and at Zandvoort as a result. But then comes the warning attached to that optimism. Even with two energy-rich circuits offering something of a reprieve, the calendar doesn't stay that way forever. Monza is coming, and Monza carries its own unique demands on a power unit, potentially opening the door for the exact same kind of issue to rear its head again if Mercedes haven't genuinely nailed down the root cause. That's the crux of what Russell needs before he can fully put Spa behind him. Not just an assurance that this weekend and next weekend should be fine because of favorable track characteristics, but real confirmation that the underlying problem has been found and permanently resolved, regardless of what circuit they're racing on. Chandok's closing point was arguably the most important one of the entire conversation. He said Russell needs to get the idea out of his head that he's somehow racing at a built-in deficit compared to his teammate. That's a really specific and pointed observation because it's not just about fixing software or diagnosing a battery fault. It's about the mental side of competing at the highest level of the sport, especially when you're watching a teenager in the same equipment rack up wins and extend a championship lead while you're stuck explaining away a DNF that wasn't really your fault. Think about the optics of it all for a second. Antonelli is still a teenager, sitting atop the championship standings, having just won at Spa, while doubling his lead over a driver with far more Grand Prix experience. That's an incredible story for Antonelli and for Mercedes as a whole, but it's also precisely the kind of scenario that can make an established driver start second-guessing where he stands in the team's long-term plans. Is the car genuinely equal between the two drivers? Are development resources being split evenly? Is there any chance, even a subconscious one within the team, of leaning toward the driver currently racking up the headlines? Those are the kinds of questions that can start to eat at a driver if they're not addressed head-on and quickly. To be clear, nothing here suggests Mercedes are actually favoring Antonelli over Russell in any deliberate sense. The team's own explanation, backed up by Wolff's comments and the confirmed software bug affecting both cars, points toward genuine bad luck rather than any kind of preferential treatment. But perception in Formula One can sometimes matter just as much as reality, especially when a driver is already feeling the pressure of a widening championship gap and an unexplained mechanical failure fresh in his memory. That's really the tightrope Mercedes have to walk this weekend and beyond. They need to give Russell the transparency and the technical reassurance he's asking for, while also making sure that reassurance is backed up by results on track. Because at some point, saying the issue has been fixed only carries so much weight. Russell needs to see it proven out across a Hungaroring weekend and beyond, ideally with a car that gives him full power exactly when he needs it and lets him race Antonelli, Hamilton, and everyone else on truly equal terms. For a driver who's spent his career building a reputation as one of the most consistently strong performers on the grid, watching a mechanical gremlin cost him valuable points while his own teammate surges further ahead in the standings is exactly the kind of moment that tests a driver's trust in his team. The next few race weekends aren't just about chasing lap times and podium finishes for Russell. They're about restoring a sense of certainty that when he climbs into that Mercedes, he's getting the exact same machine, the exact same reliability, and the exact same shot at victory as the driver sitting on the other side of the garage. Whether Mercedes can deliver that with the consistency Russell needs remains to be seen, but the clock is already ticking, and Monza is closer than anyone in that garage would probably like to admit right now.